what advice would you give to software testers who want to advance their careers by really focusing on risk management?
Okay, so as I said at the beginning, you're already in the risk management business. I think you want to do is you don't specialize in it. You're already in it. I think you want to get better at it and be able.
How do we get better at it then?
Yes. So I thought a little bit about this, and I put some bullet points down for me. And the first one I'd say is read some stuff, right? So my kind of go-to on this, I looked at all the books I've kind of referred to people over the years that will give you a good broad base of, a working body of knowledge to start around this stuff, which impacted my view on how to talk about it and think about it. One of them is The Secrets of Consulting by Jerry Weinberg. Great book on how to talk about systems, how to talk to people, and put that into that. And it's just a great book. Everybody who works in testing should read The Secrets of Consulting by Jerry Weinberg. Another book that impacted me a lot on how to think differently about risk is Anti-Fragile. That's the Nicholas Taleb's book. Again, thinking about how I always think of it in terms of over testing a system builds fragility into it. It's kind of the pesticide paradox, right? And not understanding that the amount of tests that we run and where we're potentially building fragility into our tests, our frameworks, how we exercise these systems it changed it tilted my view a little bit on how to think about testing. Two books I read by the same author. I try and reread every other year or so. Is one, people might have heard this, with Tacit and Explicit Knowledge by Harry Collins. Great. Really, to me, is a testing book to a certain extent about the difference between what you can say to people and what you learn by someone telling you and what you learn by doing. To me, there's lots. It's just a target-rich environment for ideas around what automation can and can't do, what testing can and can't do, and how to think about how people think about this stuff. That's a great book. Also, Rethinking Expertise by Harry Collins is an excellent book about thinking about risk. And a lot of people will do risky behavior. And actually, a colleague of mine gave a talk about this, and I'll put it in the chat, at a conference last year. Theo is another director at KPMG, about people's unconscious biases and how that makes them take more risky behavior. And it reminded me a lot of Rethinking Expertise and how it's on a continuum and where people view themselves on that continuum and what type of risks they're willing to take that maybe the organization isn't. Or we talked earlier, somebody asked a question about characteristics for people that introduce risk to organizations. That gave me a lot. And then I would say generally, anything by James Christie. Great. I think it's Claro Testing, that he has written tons and tons of great stuff and useful things to think about business risk, societal impact. He's done a ton of great work on the post office issue here in the UK. James Christie's blog is one of the few that's still on my must read every time he gets something out. From a heuristic perspective, so the last thing I would say to read is, and I use it almost like it's not really a mnemonic, but it's called How Complex Systems Fail by Richard Cook. And it's just really kind of a series of statements about complex systems, but every one is just rich with a different way to look at, talking about how systemic failure is caused by a cacophony of loads of small failures, and ideas on how that happens. It just requires lots of different small things to happen to do a systemic failure. So again, I'm looking at ways to think systemically about risk and how that might happen. And systems thinking is always a great place to start. So that's some stuff to read.